Hmm, 6 dislikes on my Super Famicom collection video. Clearly we have some Nintendo haters in the congregation. Well, they're sure to get a kick out of this, because I thought I'd devote this video to actually showing off some of these games. And we're going to get the ball rolling with Actrazia.
Before we begin, let me just say to Tutti UK and Sega Saturn Lad, who both correctly deduced that I was telling porky pies when I said how much I paid for this lot off of eBay, I wasn't trying to deceive my loyal console tronicas, I simply wanted to set tongues wagging at my little haul. And with that said, and us all friends again, I thought I'd start this video with a game many of you should recognise. It's Actrazia, an early and highly thought of SNES release that set the tone for the 16-bit era, showcasing the Super Nintendo's superiority over the Mega Drive in the graphics stakes. The music for this game was composed by Yuzo Koshiro, who also famously performed minor musical miracles with his Streets of Rage and Revenge of Shinobi scores. Next up is Silva Saga 2, which is the third in a trilogy of RPG games that debuted on the original Famicom and never saw light of day outside of Japan, despite being competent entries in an overcrowded JRPG market. Don't let the simplistic look of the game fool you, Silva Saga 2 has an immersive storyline and gameplay so sharp you could shave with it. If you'd like to see what you've been missing out on, I believe this series was recently fan translated and are available from any good ROM site, and probably a few dodgy ones as well. Gameplay wise, this reminds me of another popular RPG series, Dragon Quest. See what I did there? A bit of linkage. Now, if the names Akira Toriyama, Yuji Horii and Koichi Sugiyama don't mean anything to you, then you, my friend, don't know RPGs as well as you think you do. This Japanese triumvirate of artist, programmer and musician created video game and pop culture history with the Dragon Quest series, and set in stone what would become the staple elements of console role-playing for decades to come. Some early titles were released in the West under the name Dragon Warrior, but it wasn't until the 9th installment in this series on the 3DS that snooty gaijin would discover what the Japanese knew since 1986. Another RPG, this time Capcom throw their hat into the ring with Breath of Fire. I'm beginning to think the guy I bought this lot from was a fan of this genre. Breath of Fire is no groundbreaker, but it's what we in the trade call a grower. It grows on you. My first exposure to this game was the GBA re-releases, which impressed me enough to put my short arms into my deep pockets and pick up a US SNES copy. I've since played every release and count the moments until part 6 is with us. When older role-playing fans look back at the 16-bit era, one of the biggest aspects was the RPG arms race between Square and their biggest rival Enix. While waiting for the latest installments of their big franchises Dragon Quest and Final Fantasy respectively, they each in turn would pump out fresh-faced RPG titles to tide hardcore fans over. Romancing Saga is a simplistic looking but ambitious project that would see sequels and a 32-bit upgrade in the love it or hate it Saga Frontier. I know quite literally nothing about the Ultima series other than that Ultima 4 was on the Master System. I know because I owned it, yet never played it. So I will attempt to bluff my way through this. It's old. The box just says Ultima, so it could be a retweaking of the first game perhaps? Isn't this the series with Lord British in it? All I know is I don't really want to play this game anymore. Ah, now you're talking. I enjoy my Formula 1, but wasn't exactly enamoured with early computer and console attempts to capture the thrill and passion of the greatest of all motorsports. Here I've chosen to be Ayrton Senna in the Honda-powered McLaren, as the two have reteamed for 2015. As 16-bit racers go, Human Grand Prix is pretty damn good. Next up to bat is Super Puyo Puyo, which is just Tetris covered in sugar and spice and everything nice. If cutesy puzzlers are your thing, there is no shortage of games like this to whet your appetite, but if something a little different is what you're after, this is called Parlor Games, or just Parlor, I really can't tell. But you and I know it as pachinko. Drop ball bearings into the top, watch them fall. If you're lucky, they might drop into point scoring areas where you can win more balls. I've only played pachinko in games, never in real life, so thinking about it, it's definitely something to add to my bucket list. The final game I'm going to be looking at is also taking us back to a time when Final Fantasy was exclusive to Nintendo. It's Final Fantasy Vii. If anyone can remember before the Nintendo 64 was released, back when it was called the Ultra 64, Final Fantasy VII was actually announced as coming out for it until Square realised that Nintendo had gone power mad and were picking and choosing who would develop for the system, even going so far as to announce to the world that they would have final say on all games to ensure quality. Imagine how different the gaming landscape of today might have been had Square cut down Final Fantasy VII and removed the CGI cutscenes to fit it on a cartridge, or waited for Nintendo's much heralded disc-based add-on, the 64DD, and we all know how that turned out. So, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank you for watching, and be sure to stay tuned for future videos including my 200 subscriber special. This has been Gray, you've been watching Consoletronics, and I'm out of here. Laters.